Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and their personal dreams. Today, I'm delighted that Charlie Markland has joined us in the studio. Charlie is the founder and group CEO of Tribology Limited, a UK-based disruptive alcoholic drinks business. He launched the UK's first hard seltzer brand, Bodega Bay, hard seltzer, and more recently the award-winning Tribology cocktails range, taking the UK supermarkets by storm, as well as an influencer-led lager brand called Moorlash Lager. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'm intrigued and excited about the line of questioning. So yeah, very interested.
Excellent. Well, the whole purpose of this show is leaders out there listening and watching the show really want to learn from leaders that have been successful and what's informed that and what the learnings are from their careers. So why don't we get to know you a little bit first, Charlie? Just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what your current focus is.
So as we mentioned, I have a UK business that's been going for nearly 5 years now, very much about innovating in the alcoholic drinks primarily space. And we've got some other projects underway, as well as the ones you mentioned. But it's my first business, so I'm a sort of virgin entrepreneur, if you like. So taking what I've learned from being in the industry, working for some big well-known drinks brands, and trying to put that into my own business is quite a different ball game. And the leadership challenges are very different as well, actually. So yeah, I've just been working very hard on understanding where my flaws might be in my leadership style and what I can do about that. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at or what I'm up to in a nutshell.
Excellent. And it's very normal. And you've done the same thing. Most leaders that come onto the show talk about their business, which is great, and also some of the challenges they're facing. Before we get into what those challenges are and how you're trying to overcome them, also tell us about outside of work, you know, who Charlie is, what your friends see about you, family. What is it you do personally?
Hopefully everyone would describe me as a very friendly and extroverted person. I've got a family with 2 young kids. Where possible, I like to indulge in my favourite hobbies, which are surfing and snowboarding with them. In terms of where I've sort of grown up, I was born in Devon, but then lived abroad in several different countries till I was about 16. So, I've got quite a well-travelled passport, and I think that's influenced what type of person I might be today, and perhaps also what type of leader.
Excellent. Well, that leads us nicely into that question. So if you think back and reflect, and that's what I love about these questions, they get us to reflect as leaders, to look at those earlier aspects of your life, whether it was childhood, teenage years, or after that. What was it about those experiences most shaped your leadership style, either early in your career or even now?
Yeah, I think there's probably sort of 2 elements. There's moving around a lot, starting several new schools at an early age. Has meant that I've become someone who's good at creating rapport and very keen to make friends as quickly as possible, albeit they don't get to stick around for long enough sometimes. And so I think that's made me hopefully quite an approachable leader, but it also has its downsides that I'm sure we'll trip over later. And then I guess the other element is we were abroad because my father worked for Shell Petrol. He was a captain of oil tankers and dive ships that worked on oil rigs. So I'm not pleading the whole "my father was never around" story fully, but yeah, you know, I spent a lot more time with my mum and sister than I ever did with my father. So I think there's some interesting things that pop up around that.
Yeah, and I can relate to that as well. My dad, he was working in Saudi Arabia. He was 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off. So I only really saw him sort of every 6 weeks, really. And then when he was around, it was difficult for him to engage with the family a lot of the time. So I can really relate to what it is you're talking about. We'll see how that's obviously shaped your story. So bear in mind that was the background. Even though you've been successful in your career and you're obviously growing a business successfully with all the challenges that has, when did you first notice that maybe some of those aspects of your upbringing were impacting your leadership in a negative way?
Perhaps in my last job before starting the business, I was working for a big beer company called Asahi, who owned Peroni in meantime and several other beer brands. It was the first time I really had to manage several people rather than just one or two, and also different tiers. So I would manage someone who managed other people as well. And I think learning how, as a natural people pleaser, because of that sort of relationship I had growing up, trying to make friends very quickly in lots of new places, I think that was when I started to notice that perhaps my leadership style was a little bit too soft and perhaps less results orientated and more about building a team that people wanted to be a part of, which both can be true and both are important, but perhaps I paid less attention to the results orientated element, which sometimes meant more difficult conversations that I think naturally I shied away from. That's probably the main thing, the main time I noticed it.
And what I'm really interested in there is sometimes we notice it ourselves because it's affecting how we show up in certain relationships where maybe it does need to be more of a performance type management discussion. But other times it's somebody that taps on the shoulder and says, you probably need to look at that. What was it with you? How did you become aware of it?
I think I suspected it myself plenty, but I do quite vividly remember my boss saying to me at the time, I get that they don't want to do X, Y, Z, but they work for the business. The business has these targets, and they need to just insert curse word, get on with it. So and I think that was his unsubtle way of saying, get a bit more direct, measured, articulate, but more direct.
Yeah, and in your case, as you've described it, it manifested in that way. With many of the leaders that I come across and have worked with over the years, it manifests in different ways, but it still affects how they show up in relationship in terms of sometimes consistency or, as you say, getting people to do things, which is what you're there for, as the leader around that. So how did you then, once you'd noticed that and became aware of it, how did you start to adapt your leadership style either there or into the business that you've started to reconcile some of those experiences?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that being a flaw that we identified is I should have the tools to deal with it. In the same way that I have the diplomacy skill to make friends in new places, you should be able to articulate, direct feedback to your employees in a way that motivates them, but also lands the point. And I think that's when the main thing I really did was put in more structured processes for feedback. So one-to-one meetings with all employees, so that the ones who needed the airtime got it, and the others just got it as a bonus. So that it was less obvious I was singling someone out as someone who needed particular performance coaching, but equally gave me a platform and a reminder, frankly, to think about how I need to manage certain people more effectively and respond to their ways of working, what type of communication they need.
And what changes did you notice when you start putting that process and structure in?
I wouldn't say I nailed it first time. I mean, there was certainly one or two individuals who it took me longer to really get them on the page that they needed to be on. But essentially, I would say by the end of within about a year, I had everyone where we needed them to be, and I had found my rhythm for how to communicate in the way that suits me and my sort of default style, but the way that gets the results required, rather than just being Mr. Nice Guy, the fun team to work for. It was both. It was the fun but performance team to work for.
Yeah, and they go hand in hand then, as you say, is that awareness. A lot of leaders don't get to that stage of recognising, that's what they need to do. And unfortunately, that does affect performance, as you suggested. I'm really fascinated. Obviously, I started my own business in 2017, and actually even 2 years prior to that, had told people I would never start my own business. So I obviously had a eureka moment. But when did you know that at some point in the future you would start something?
Yeah, it's quite funny. There's similarities in the story then. I essentially, all the way through school, university, and my 20s, I remember thinking and people saying to me, I could so imagine you doing your own business. Like, why aren't you going and doing your own business? And then as I got trapped in the mortgage trap and building a family and stuff in the 30s, I started to get very comfortable with the safety net of employment. And I remember myself saying in maybe 2017, 18, yeah, I don't really get why people go and start businesses. It's petrifying. How do they even do it? And could I possibly spin all those different plates at the same time? The answer, by the way, is no, but we've got a solution for that in a second. And then in a really bizarre twist, it was when we had my first child that I sat there and thought, well, the problem with the career ladder, from my perspective, and this may only be me, was I was seeing it as in some ways more risky than starting a business, because in my mind I was like, yes, I can perform as best I can, maybe I can move up the ladder, and maybe that's a 10k pay bump every couple of years that you move up. But to create that really sort of financial independence that I wanted for me and my family, to achieve my ultimate goal, which is to use my time better, to have more, have the independence financially to be able to go on long holidays or great holidays and stuff, and do more things with my children. I was like, actually, the only way I'm going to do that is to start my own business. So, and worst comes to worst, I can always go back to the career ladder. I will have just lost maybe a couple of years or 3 years or something. So it's funny that, it was 3 months after my first child was born, I was saying to people, I actually think it's more risky not to start a business from my perspective, so I'm going to go do it, which was a slightly niche approach for someone who just brought their first child into the world. But I still believe that, and so far it's worked. It's not been easy, but it's worked.
And what's interesting about what you say there is I believe that people who do start up their own business, right from a young age, really, or maybe into their teens or early 20s, it's probably been burning there. Doesn't matter how small it is, but there's been something burning there. And yet, as you say, for the right reasons at the time, we want to get a base and survive and build, obviously, a future for ourselves. But there's something there that's just nagging a little bit. So I hear that a lot from entrepreneurs that maybe do it later in their careers or do it after a period of stability.
I mean, to add to that, I find it really interesting that it was when I was sort of 13, 14 and getting in trouble at school for smoking and trying to get my hands on some booze and stuff like that, that I remember the headmaster, who had a particular shining to me, saying, I suspect there's something much more you could be doing. And he was the one who sort of planted that seed that I can really imagine you starting a business one day. And it's interesting that if I look on paper at what he would have been looking at, literally report cards and school and things like that, there would be no indication. Like that my grades were average or worse. I was a good rugby player, and that was about it. So I sort of know what he must have seen, because I see it in some people I meet now. When you meet a sort of 20, 21, 22-year-old who's in a group, and you're like, that one's just got something about them, some extra spark that you could really see that they could take people on a journey with them, be they investors, be they customers, be they employees. And that's the one I think is the one to watch. And, I guess that must be something along the lines of what he saw, but it would be quite hard to write that on a piece of paper or pull that off a piece of paper, off people's report cards and stuff. It's something you probably have to see in action, and see that energy in a room amongst people without the energy, so that you can really spot them. And I wonder if maybe that's what he was implying, but we won't know, because I haven't chased him for a long time.
No, but I can relate to what you're saying, and because I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders, what I think it comes down to and boils down to, although I can't prove this yet, is that I think entrepreneurs and really great leaders have great ideas. Not only that, but they can engage people in those ideas and get them excited about them, and therefore build some kind of movement, which we'll come to you in a minute. And then it's about, do they have the desire to make that thing happen, so that when they get the knockbacks, it's still there. Well, I'm going to do this. I want it so much to happen to realize those ideas. And the final piece, in terms of where successful entrepreneurs and leaders tend to then move on to achieving it, is where they get out their own way. And this is what we're going to move on to now. How do we as leaders make sure we recognize how we get in our own way in relationships in particular, to be able to then realize that ambition, that dream, that desire to come to fruition. So let's move into that. And as you transition from working for an organization where you are learning how to manage people more effectively and lead them more effectively, just talk the transition into entrepreneurship and what you struggle with, what you cope with, and maybe some of the attributes from your earlier experiences that even helped you in that way. Just talk about the transition. That'd be useful.
Yeah, I think unless you're a very unusual startup, the strangest part of the transition is, for all the reasons you just said, and I agree, that it perhaps takes to be a successful entrepreneur, those reasons tend to come in line with someone who's a bit more extroverted, someone who feeds off and then generates and expels their own energy off with people. And the funniest thing about the entrepreneurship journey is, certainly for most businesses, I would imagine above 90% of them, the first 6 months to a year is by yourself. And I think that's possibly the strangest part of the transition, that you go from saying, yeah, I'm the type of person who can take employees with me, hopefully bring investors into the fold, win over customers, and all the rest of it. But then you go and do that by yourself, and it's an incredibly lonely period. And I think what became really clear to me within the first 6 months was, I'm perhaps more sales, marketing, vision and energy. I am not detail, operations and finance. And so very quickly I was like, I need a yin to my yang, and frankly I just want someone else to talk to. Like, there are so many questions when you're an entrepreneur, so many things you have to answer yourself in so many areas that you've not had experience in, that you just need that sounding board, and you need that sort of validation on those areas where you're a bit uncomfortable. And I think that's probably the toughest part of the journey, is doing that first stretch by yourself. But for what it's worth, my advice to anyone, particularly if they're in my line of experience, launching a sort of food or drink brand, is don't underestimate the value of a co-founder, particularly if their skill set is the yin to your yang, because I managed to put that in place by about 9 months. I met someone who was an ex-operations and finance director, and he's everything I'm not, and we get on perfectly well, but he's everything I'm not. And actually, the second I got him, it gave me the headspace to pursue the bits I'm good at, trust him with the bits I'm not, but collectively we can move the ship forward. And I think had I not found that, I probably would have dropped enough plates for the whole thing to fail, for sure. And I think that might be something that luckily I recognized in myself early and did something about, rather than sort of doggedly assume I can do it all. Because you feel like you have enough ideas to tackle every angle. And, I did an MBA a few years ago, and so had a light touch understanding of those weak areas like finance and supply chain. But if something's not your sweet spot, it never gets your best work. And with a startup, I think it makes a lot of sense to find someone who has that as their sweet spot, and then just come to a sort of understanding of how much you do or don't get involved, so that you can concentrate on your strengths.
And how much truth do you think is there? I appreciate what you're saying there. And again, many entrepreneurs do that, too late, or they don't do it soon enough, because they have to sometimes let go of the control. And that's what drives a lot of successful leaders, feeling as though they're in control. And of course, we're never in total control, but that feeling's there. So how much truth do you think there is in terms of when you're ready to let go and bring somebody else in to be the yin to your yang, that you're ready to receive that? Because some people might say they're going to do it, but you've really got to be ready, because that person will sense from the energy whether actually you're ready to let go. How much truth are there in thinking that you're ready to receive it?
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe my case is a bit different, because I didn't bring this person in on a sort of 50-50 basis. So I retained the ultimate sort of say, if you like, but I think it's just in my nature to let go of things that I don't have a deep understanding of, not because I'm not interested, just because I don't want to make a mistake. And so and funnily enough, I guess I have a lot of trust in people, and that's possibly a flaw that's developed from a flaw, or at least a watch out, that's developed insofar as I find I'm quite happy to say to people, here's the project, go and do it your way. If you want my help, I'm here, but I trust you. And then often I sort of get a bit let down. But with him in particular, he's never let me down, or where it has, it's been a daft mistake, So I think on the one hand that trusting nature is helpful when you need to learn to let go of some things, but it can be a real watch out if you're trying to lead, say, a really strongly focused performance team, is what I was in my last actual paid job. So it's a slightly different scenario for that.
Great. And then while you've been leading this business, as it grows further, just talk to us a little bit about how you manage to keep those negative feelings in check, because I love Shirzad Shamin's work around saboteurs and all those negative thoughts that we have that affect our judgment, affect our decision making, and moving away from those feelings of imposter syndrome and doubt to be able to make decisions from either a neutral or a positive place. Just talk to us about how you manage that negativity so you can be in the best place to make the decisions.
Yeah, so initially I got sort of very into reading business books, and I will not be the last entrepreneur to say this, that do not underestimate how much value you can get from reading sort of top class business books, because not just about the process or the science of business. I mean more about the sort of motivation and psychology and understanding what motivates people and stuff. And I remember reading one which was talking about how every single entrepreneur, unless they sort of born with a silver spoon with loads of money backed by the family, has had imposter syndrome. They have areas that are not their strengths, and they didn't feel like they knew what they were doing a lot of the time. But the reality is there are no teachers. No one's here who knows all the answers to every question anyway. And people will make lots of mistakes, but all the really successful entrepreneurs, much more successful than I am, will tell you that they've gone through several periods where they didn't know exactly what they were doing. They were slightly winging it. But I'm not sure it's about sort of faking it until you make it. It's more like, believe it until you are it. As in, if you just need to have faith that you will produce enough good work to keep that element spinning, and you can perfect it later. I think one of the things that helps me and most of the people I know who have done really well is they're not actually perfectionists. Being a perfectionist is almost the kiss of death, because you never actually just get round to shipping the product. You never just get moving, take advantage of the timing of you having XYZ idea or some angle or new sort of disruptive take on an opportunity. I think I would ditch perfectionism, but sort of fake it till you make it, because you'll be surprised how many people have done that. No one knows all the answers. No one person is going to be brilliant at all elements of their startup. You only need to get moving and then fix, iterate, learn, grow, make it better. And that's where a lot of stories come. Look at Dyson. He had billions of products that didn't work, and he just kept plowing on and learning, and then he struck a great product, and now he's got this massive technology platform that has people there to help him where he doesn't excel, and he has a sounding board for whether his wacky ideas work or not. And I know people who have worked there, and they'll say he's ditched as many ideas as we've produced, even since the success, because that's what you need. You just need to get out there in the world, and then you can fix and create the perfect product. But don't stifle yourself by trying to wait for all the ducks to be in a row. They're never all in a row. You just have to get moving at some point and take the leap.
I agree, and I'm also well read in business and leadership as you are. What do you think are the must reads for listeners out there and people that are watching this now, if they're either at a transition point or just thinking about how they can improve their own leadership and understanding of business psychology, etc.? What do you think are the must reads for them?
So I think some of my favourites. I've really enjoyed Grant Cardone, which is 10X is his book. If you need that kick up the bum to make the leap, so that he sort of plants that seed that it's almost riskier not to shoot for financial independence off your own business than not. So I find that from a motivational point of view very strong. From a sort of marketing sort of crash course on the basics in a really enjoyable read, anything by Seth Godin, who wrote The Purple Cow and books about tribes, which interestingly was part of the reason we call ourselves Tribology. It's sort of mixing drinks for different tribes. Who else? Thinking Big is a good one. And what's the there's one, I think it's called Play. I might have to get you to insert it later, but there's one which is talking about how, like, if you look at some of the most successful consumer brands that have come out in the last 20 years, most of them play into a space of a bigger category rather than just thinking about a product. They launch with one product and they make a great product, and that's what makes their business and makes them known. But they're actually making a category play, and that's when you look at, I don't know, Nike starting with trainers, but essentially becoming a platform for all things performance, sports, lifestyle. And then innocent drinks start with smoothies, but really innocent is synonymous with anything that has got no additives, a playful language, and lives in a world of grab and go sort of fruit and drinks. And I think things like that just make you expand your mind a bit and go, well, these guys didn't start saying, Nike didn't start saying, I'm going to make a lifestyle brand via a sports brand, via a pair of trainers. He created and got on with shipping one good product, made it better, and then the business grew from there. And ultimately, he always kept his eye on how wide can this be? How much can I stretch this brand? And there's a lot of stories which are like that.
Yeah, I love that. And that
Play
leads
Bigger.
into...
That's what it's called.
Play Bigger. No, I love that one. I'll need to read that. I've not read that one. Thank you. So that leads into, bear in mind the leadership journey that you've been on so far, obviously the background that you had in terms of moving around, that ability to get on with people, and then the learning from that as you've got older. What advice would you give to leaders out there that are listening or watching this about how they channel their own story, whatever's been working for them, into channeling success over the long term and really following their dream, whatever that might be for them?
What I would say is it's a very comfortable rhythm to work for someone else in a career and become an expert. And that in most cases is how people live their lives. And that's absolutely fine. I think if you are sat there with a niggle inside you that there is something more you might be able to do if you were totally in control of it, if you had your own business. I personally think there isn't enough risk to stop you doing that. I think what's interesting about most of the successful entrepreneurs I've come across is they didn't set it up in their garage at age 18. They went and had a career. They became a specialist over maybe a decade after university or school. And that was when they took the leap, so that they felt they had the comfortable market and brand knowledge, product knowledge of their area. But then they were like, hang on, I want to try and do this myself. And I think it's worth saying that, you know, when you first start this, almost everyone close to you thinks you're mad. You know, and a lot of people don't see why you would risk giving up a steady paycheck and why you'd risk any uncertainty. But the reality is even if you're moderately successful, you're likely to get to the level where you had reached in your salaried role, and but you'll have complete control. And like, you know, having kids makes you very very nervous about keeping a roof over their head and all the rest of it. But equally, you want to be able to afford time with them. And when you're completely in charge of your business, you really can. And like, you can, yes, there are days and nights where I don't make it home until very late. But essentially, there's also days where, you know, someone's ill and I just go, guys, I've got to go, and just go home for the day and spend my whole day with the kids. And I know that the business keeps moving without me. And that's So it's not as all consuming as I think a lot of the media make it out. You know, all these sort of, the 5 a.m. Club book, for example, makes it sound like, you know, every CEO on the planet only sleeps for 4 hours. It's madness. I know loads of people who are really successful who have completely normal work-life patterns. They just make sure they are very condensed in their efforts during their work hours. And they steal an hour from the weekend and give it back on the Tuesday. And, you know, you make it work because you actually have the complete autonomy to do that. I don't think this image of entrepreneurs being some character who works ungodly hours and takes all the risk in the world is valid. And, you know, I started my business where I essentially I just timed it in such a way that I started raising money the day I left my previous employer, and within the first month had raised just enough that I could pay myself a basic salary the next month. So I actually never put any money in myself, and I can't afford to. I'm just not structured that way. I didn't have loads of savings. So again, that goes back to this risk thing where I'm like, was there really that much risk? If you take 2 years out and do something like that, you will not believe what you learn. I mean, the MBA was completely irrelevant compared to what I've learned in the last 4.5 years. It gave me the confidence to go and do what I've done. So there's a bit of a flywheel in there. But essentially, I've learned a lot more in 4.5 years doing this by myself than I have in any qualification or any salaried role I was ever in. And I think that's the exciting bit, you know. Go out there and break stuff, as people like to say, and work it out. If it doesn't work, you've still got the same CV. It's just got a bit more of an explanation for the last few years. That's it.
No, absolutely. And I love the energy that you're bringing to that and that passion. And what I understand from what you're saying is, and I see this a lot with leaders that I work with here in corporates, there's always this ability to blame our environment, to blame our boss, to blame whatever it is that's stopping us for living the life that we want. But in reality, you know, it is ourselves. And if we can make that jump to be in a role in a business that we feel passionate about, the only thing that's stopping us then is us. There is nothing else. It doesn't matter how bad the market is. It's how we show up in that market, how we strategize in that. And that's what I love about what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if it sort of articulates the point nicely, you know, after 3 years of having launched Bodega Bay, our hard seltzer brand in the UK, the UK just haven't taken to that type of drink. So in the summer last year, in 2022, I sort of woke up in a blind sweat at 4 a.m. and was like, this isn't going to happen, and this business won't survive if this is all we're doing. And we started racking our brains for a couple of days about what other opportunities we saw, and we had talked about cocktails, and we had talked about the ranges at supermarket and the gap in there, a big gap in the alcohol strength, particularly in price point. And by the end of the next week, we were phoning up Sainsbury's saying, what do you think of this? And they were like, actually, we agree with you. We were talking about this the other day. And by November, we had created a liquid, a brand, and presented it to Sainsbury's, who were like, well, that looks great. We'll launch it. So they launched it in April this year. And suddenly we're doing the same revenue this year as we did the year before last. And none of it is from Bodega Bay. Bodega Bay just dropped off a cliff completely. And like, where would you ever get to move that fast, create something, use any creativity you've got that quickly, and then show a success for it? And it's yeah, you can sense in my energy. Like, it's been a very stressful 12 months, but my God, I'm proud of what we've achieved together, us, me and the team. And, we've resurrected the business fundamentally in that period. And you just never get to make such big moves when you're in your career. And this isn't telling everyone you need to leave your career. It's a terrible idea. That's not my point. My point is, when you feel that you might be at that stage, that you might want to do more, and you might want to have that risk, but also that impact, then that's when I say, go for it, because you can't really break that much unless you remortgage your house from start to finish and put it all into a business. I'm not necessarily advocating that. But if you can find a way that's a palatable way to do it, and you've got an inkling or a yearning to do it, go for it. It's as fun as it is stressful, and if it works, you can't imagine that you ever were going to carry on the way you were.
Absolutely. So one final question from me, Charlie, in terms of the future for you. So we talked at the start about people following their dreams and their vision and their desire around that. So, what's your dream now? What is it you're yet to do? And how can people get in touch with you if they want to collaborate with you in any way?
We started the business as a one brand thing. It was as I say, Virgin Entrepreneur, first thing I've done. It's turned into this sort of mini disruptive drinks portfolio. And we love collaborations, and we've got all sorts of ideas. That's why we've done an influencer led beer brand to see if we can create drinks brands around celebrities and stuff like that. So if anyone does want to get in touch about anything drinks or food related, please do. Charlie@tribology.co.uk. In terms of what we're trying to achieve, ultimately, we want to become as well known as we can be by the big drinks companies as this sort of this incubator of exciting drinks brands that could be acquired one day. Ultimately, I'd like to maybe sell one or two of the brands or the whole business, but not yet. Like, we're having too much fun when it's fun, and so we that's my kind of goal, is to be that the brand that people say at the end of a sentence after, they go Diageo and Pernod and Budweiser and all these massive drinks companies, but don't forget that small company Tribology, because they've had 3 brands now that have hit the market and proven market fit. Let's see what they do next. That's quite exciting. I think that's how I'd like to move the business forward, and then ultimately one day, move into that place where I can be sort of 6 months on, 6 months off, do more of that traveling that I did when I was younger.
Excellent. Well, Charlie, I really appreciate you sharing your experiences today with the energy, the passion that you've done that. I know our audience would have really learned a lot, and many of them will have been inspired to reflect on their own leadership style, about how they lead themselves, how they lead others. Do they have that spark within them to maybe go and do something else in the future? And what's the worst that could happen if they do that? So I really thank you very much for your time today.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure. It feels very self-indulgent to be talking about myself like this, but I think it's fun when you can land a couple of the points like you just said there, if someone needs to hear them. If they don't, ignore me. Absolutely fine.
I love it. Well, thank you very much again, Charlie. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can find out more information about conscious leadership and self-coaching by just typing in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser. So until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.